Imagine a city so secret it didn't appear on any map. A place where over 100,000 people lived and worked, their entire existence wiped from public records. This was Oziorsk, also known as City 40, the heart of the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons program. And in 1957, it became the site of a catastrophe that would remain hidden from the world for decades, a nuclear disaster far worse than many have ever heard of. This is the story of the Kyshtym disaster, a silent apocalypse in the Ural Mountains. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we are journeying into one of the Cold War's darkest secrets. To understand what happened, we need to go back to the aftermath of World War II. The world was split into two, locked in a terrifying arms race. The United States had the atomic bomb, and the Soviet Union was desperate to catch up. Their answer was the Mayak Production Association, a massive nuclear complex built in haste near the town of Kyshtym. The mission was simple: produce weapons-grade plutonium and do it as fast as humanly possible. The pressure was immense. Safety protocols were an afterthought, seen as a luxury that would slow down progress. At Mayak, highly radioactive waste was being generated at an alarming rate. Instead of building robust, long-term storage facilities, the engineers opted for a quicker, but far more dangerous solution: large underground steel tanks. Each tank held about 80 tons of liquid nuclear waste. To prevent the radioactive material from overheating and boiling, a makeshift cooling system was installed. It was a ticking time bomb, and nobody seemed to realize, or perhaps nobody cared enough to stop it. On September 29, 1957, the inevitable happened. A coolant pipe in one of the tanks, tank number 14, failed. For over a year, the cooling system had been slowly breaking down. The temperature inside the tank began to rise uncontrollably. The liquid waste started to evaporate, leaving behind a volatile mixture of dried nitrate and acetate salts. At around 4:20 p.m., a single spark, likely from the monitoring equipment, ignited the mixture. The result was a colossal chemical explosion, not a nuclear one, but its consequences were just as devastating. The blast, estimated to have the force of about 70 to 100 tons of TNT, was immense. It blew apart the 1-meter-thick concrete lid covering the tank and hurled it aside like a piece of cardboard. A massive plume of radioactive particles, a deadly cocktail of cesium-137 and strontium-90, was shot a mile into the sky. The explosion itself was heard for miles, and people saw a strange, colorful glow in the sky, an eerie aurora that some mistook for a celestial phenomenon. They had no idea they were witnessing the largest release of radioactivity into the environment the world had ever seen. 4 hours, the radioactive cloud drifted silently eastward, carried by the prevailing winds. It stretched for over 300 kilometers, blanketing a vast area of more than 20,000 square kilometers. This contaminated zone became known as the East Urals Radioactive Trace, or EURT. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, but shrouded in secrecy. Within 10 hours, the first villages downwind began to experience the fallout. A strange, greasy dust settled on everything: the fields, the houses, the livestock, the people. No public announcement was made. No warnings were issued. The local population was left completely in the dark. 10 days after the explosion, authorities finally began a haphazard and selective evacuation of the nearest villages. But their methods were chillingly deceptive. They told residents it was a temporary measure due to a contagious disease or for agricultural experiments. People were forced to leave everything behind: their homes, their possessions, their pets, their livestock. They were herded onto trucks with only the clothes on their backs, never to return. In the following 2 years, 23 villages were systematically evacuated, dismantled, and literally buried, erased from the earth to hide the evidence. So why was this massive disaster kept secret? The answer lies in the paranoia of the Cold War. The Mayak plant was the crown jewel of the Soviet nuclear program. Admitting to such a colossal failure was unthinkable. It would have been a national embarrassment and, more importantly, it would have revealed the location and purpose of their top-secret facility to the West. The Soviet government chose to sacrifice its own people to protect its secrets. For them, the Cold War was a battle for survival, and the residents of the Ural region were acceptable collateral damage. The world, and even most Soviet citizens, remained completely oblivious. The CIA had detected signs of a major incident through aerial surveillance, but, lacking concrete information, they also chose to remain silent, fearing that publicizing it could fuel anti-nuclear sentiment in America and Europe, hindering their own weapons programs. The environmental and human impact was catastrophic and long-lasting. The East Urals radioactive trace remains one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Strontium-90, with a half-life of nearly 29 years, integrated into the soil and water. It mimicked calcium in the food chain, accumulating in the bones of animals and humans, leading to chronic radiation sickness, leukemia, and a host of cancers. For decades, the people who lived in the contaminated zone suffered from mysterious illnesses. Doctors were forbidden from diagnosing radiation sickness, instead instructed to label it as a special disease or vegetative dystonia. The true cause of their suffering was a state secret. Generations were born with health problems, their lives irrevocably scarred by an accident they were never told about. The ecosystem was devastated. Forests died, rivers became toxic, and the land became a permanent radioactive wasteland. For over 30 years, the truth remained buried. The first crack in the wall of silence came from an unlikely source. Georges Medvedev, a Soviet biologist and dissident living in exile in London, published an article in 1976 in the journal New Scientist. He pieced together the puzzle from vague references in Soviet scientific papers that mentioned ecological studies of irradiated areas. He deduced that a major nuclear accident must have occurred in the Urals in the late 1950s. His claims were initially dismissed by Western nuclear experts as anti-Soviet propaganda. They couldn't believe a disaster of that magnitude could be kept secret for so long. But Medvedev was persistent. In 1979, he published his book, Nuclear Disaster in the Urals, which provided more detailed evidence. Still, it wasn't until the era of glasnost and the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 that the Soviet Union began to open up. The Chernobyl catastrophe made it impossible to deny the dangers of nuclear power, and the pressure for transparency grew. Finally, in June 1989, nearly 32 years after the event, the Soviet government officially acknowledged the Kyshtym disaster. They released documents and declassified information, confirming Medvedev's assertions and finally revealing the horrifying truth to the world. The story of the Kyshtym disaster is a chilling lesson in the dangers of secrecy and the devastating human cost of unchecked ambition. It stands as a stark reminder that the pursuit of power, when divorced from accountability and human empathy, can lead to ruin. The forbidden zone around Mayak, though partially remediated, still bears the invisible scars of 1957. It's a silent monument to the thousands of lives that were irrevocably altered, not just by a technological failure, but by a government that chose to erase them from history. By remembering their story, we honor the victims and reaffirm our commitment to ensuring that such a tragedy, born of silence and secrecy, never happens again. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into forgotten history. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.